Hello and welcome to the AI Summit London. My name is Rudy Ducat and I've been joined by the fantastic Benjamin, founder and CEO of TrueRights. Thank you so much for your time and joining me.
Thanks for having me.
For the folks back home, just to give us a bit of colour and background to your quite colourful background and just a bit of insight.
So I came from the influencer space. And so I worked at an agency called influence.com for about almost a decade, which is showing my age ever so slightly. But this was really early on to the creator economy. And so the company gives it away a little bit how early we were because of the great SEO domain name of having influencer.com. But I was there for a number of years and it really was from third employee all the way up to 150. So from account exec all the way through to global partnerships, through to commercial directors when I left. And loved it. Loved being part of an industry in a growing space because, I see a lot of similarities with AI now, but back in the creator launching days, influencer marketing, when that started to come to fruition, you were going in speaking to global CMOs on what influencers were, how they could represent their brand, how to give away kind of poetic license for creators to now start to create content. And that was fantastic to be a part of the kind of educational piece that kind of came alongside that. And became global partnerships, which meant that I was advising social platforms on how to build their creator communities. How do we get more creators on TikTok, creating TikToks, that sort of thing? How do we encourage monetization of creators? How do we encourage adoption of go-to-market strategy? So if TikTok want to bring out live or shoppable features or Instagram want to bring out reels, how do we encourage creators to get on top of that? And ultimately, how do we become a production partner with creators that facilitates media spend? And that was kind of a start behind what TrueRights has now become, was that we were seeing a lot of advertisers buying content from us to then repurpose on social platforms in the shape of ads. And in order to do so, they needed to buy the rights for that content. And this was, quite a significant amount of rights that were being purchased. But what we noticed is there was no technical infrastructure underneath it that allowed just better licensing frameworks, from better fair pricing to content monitoring to being paid what was owed, but how your content was distributed. And that started to kick things off. And then actually towards the end of that, I was advising TikTok very heavily on their AI platform called TikTok Symphony, which is a all-encompassing AI tool where advertisers can go in, they can start to create content with digital avatars in seconds, which was quite alarming for a production-based influencer agency because that is a direct competitor. And they said, how do we put your face? How do we put Ben's likeness, Nike's logos? How do we put IP into content? Consent, control, compensation at scale, all the attributions that you need from a kind of licensing framework in this new AI world. And that's what we then started to build for. It was how do we solve the existing issues around rights licensing for content, but also now this new world is licensing your face, and how do we make sure that we're protecting that as well?
Yeah, great. And just touching on the human side of things, where does human creative direction have the most leverage in the AI-enabled campaigns? And how do you scale that, without diluting the originality of the brand voice?
I think you've always got to have a human involved. I think, you mentioned you've got a background in media. Human elements towards any creative or campaign are highly important to understand resonance, community. How do we build affinity with a brand? And actually, our chief product officer, a guy called Manon Dave, is by his own remark a creative technologist. But he has this great concept around ideas not included, which is when you were younger and you got a present at Christmas, it was all playing on the whole batteries not included concept. And actually what technology and AI has allowed us to do is all become creative technologists. But the human element is still that you need to input the creative. You still need to make sure that you're adding inspiration, adding context, and then the AI, the technology, is what scales it, optimizes it, allows you to do it, in a speed we've never done before. And so I think the human element towards certainly creative in AI is massively still required, and I think will always be involved in the process.
And just touching on that speed and growth, at an enterprise level, looking at the AI rights today, how can you enforce that across partners and platforms?
It's very hard. It's what we're trying to do. Yeah, it's the difficulty is standardization, and I think you've seen in this market, in other markets, a move towards better policy, but we haven't quite got there yet. There are regulatory requirements coming in, and that every kind of policymaker is trying their best to try and put things into practice. And it's great to have these overarching, guardrails, but actually you need enforcement. And we're now in this kind of hyper digital kind of landscape where AI is playing a huge part in that. And so enforcement needs to be technical as well. So how do we make sure that we're bridging these partnerships, building the technology that allows us to not only monitor and find and identify and attribute and everything else involved within that, but also to inform and enforce what those rights actually are that have been outlined. And so we look at licensing now as, if you'd asked us probably 5 years ago, or ask any lawyers or anything like that, it's a one-to-one. We sign a contract, you then have the assets, and then you can go and do it. But now it's so technically driven that actually licensing starts with registering your rights all the way through to enforcing and earning. And that's a 7-step process that we've made. And so it's far more technical. It's far more dependent, I guess, on enforcement measures, as well as also just the first kind of brokered system. But I think also from an enterprise standpoint, it's about buy-in. It's about partnerships and integrations that allow us to be interoperable.
And just going a little bit granular with that, how do you then define, verify, and safeguard, digital twin versus a general likeness, and who controls prevent of the misuse within that scenario?
So I think it's important to note where we come from within this, and I think we always wanted, as TrueRights, we always wanted to be a rights management system that gives infrastructure to rights holders, and so we've started with creatives, but actually that encompasses brands, that encompasses talent, musicians, actors, athletes, anyone else that kind of sits within that, the infrastructure to better own their digital identity and rights. And so when you look at digital twins, or you look at existing kind of non-digital twin led AI or non-AI content, I think what we wanted to do is become the system that sits in the middle and allows you to have visibility on how it's being used. There's a lot of tools out there, generative AI, and part of the reason we started this is that we went to all these generative AI tools and we said, pretend I'm David Beckham. It's a bit of a stretch, but just do your best to pretend. If you want to have David Beckham on Runway or HeyGen or 11 Labs or OpenAI, he then has to sign up to each platform. So to be a digital twin on those, he has to sign up, opt in, put his data sets on there, sign up to 10 different code of conduct, 10 different platform policies, different payment terms. He also has to check in every day, have a look at what deals he has available, how is his IP being used, what happens if Nike want to work with him on 11 Labs and Adidas want to work with him on HeyGen. How do you have this system that consolidates it? And then you put a talent manager or a union or a representative on top of that, and you've got hundreds of talent. It becomes almost near impossible. And so I think for us, it was always about how do we become this agnostic partner in the middle that facilitates better AI for digital twins, that allows them to ensure they have access to it based on the consent of the talent. And so verification is a massively important part for us. As I said to you before, licensing for us starts at rights registry. Registration of what you own. Do you own it? Can you confirm it? Can we ascertain what your IP now constitutes? It's not just your content anymore. When we were talking to TikTok Symphony, it was like your height, your weight, your personal attributes, eye color, ethnicity, the way you walk, the way you talk. And I actually had a really bizarre conversation with Terry Crews, I don't know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine Terry Crews, who was talking about intellectual property and personality rights, and how actually in this new era of AI, it's going to be intellectual personality. And so it's very interesting as to how the whole market's evolving, but verification is the first part that we start at.
And just touching then on the finance side of things, with licensing and subscription structures, best converting AI accelerated content, what do you see from your experience, and how does those kind of royalties and reporting flow work?
I think we've got an opportunity to rewrite the rule book. I think you've seen similar infrastructure with music, and collection societies, clearing houses that allow artists to be paid based on content exposure. So, I'm an artist, I upload my tracks, they get paid in a public setting, and I get paid for it. I think what we're seeing now is evolution of that market. And so it's no longer about collection societies manning that and then trying to distribute those funds. It's more now based on the rights holder or the person involved to make those deals themselves, understand what a fair price looks like. What we're envisaging will happen is with AI, there'll be a surplus of content entering the market, and actually it will be the cause of change, advertisers, those that actually have the budgets that will want to evolve that kind of mechanism for how they pay. We can't expect that advertisers will pay for 50 assets up front, not knowing how they're going to perform from a media point of view. But if we can build the monitoring system off the back of it, and to your point about royalties, when you're creating a surplus of content, we can now actually pay you on performance based on exposure. And so this new era of AI content that might contain your likeness or my likeness, how do we give that to advertisers to go and put within media mixes? And then how do we make sure that we're ascertaining what the value is of that media and then paying them based a royalty based on the exposure of it? So how do we make the kind of same mechanism to some extent that music has, but it's done on the terms of the talent and the creator?
Makes sense. And just picking up what you said beforehand, it's not just about the content now for people to resell. What are the kind of no-goes, goes, or criteria that you're looking for in the validation steps before a prototype hits production?
I think it's these deals are being struck now, and I think they were struck from the first issue we have within AI and with media is the training issue. A lot of creatives, photographers, musicians, other industries that were being highly affected their content's being stripped and it's being trained upon. And I think that's happened, and I don't think there's much of a commercial standpoint for that to have longevity within it. I think these tools are becoming too self-sufficient and developing themselves to some regard, or they're finding cheaper ways to ascertain content. But I think when it comes to the actual generative AI piece and creating content of someone's likeness through AI and through creative, again, we're seeing it being done. Like we saw, I want to make sure I named the brand right. It might have been Adidas. Yeah, I think it was Adidas that had their recent World Cup campaign that looked at taking like traditional legacy footballers, Zidane, David Beckham. And I used to love the old PepsiCo ads where you bring everyone together into one environment and playing football. But they brought back those legacy creators via AI and then had them playing with, kids and everything else in terms of like on the streets playing football. And I think what you're seeing now is that's happening. So we've moved away from prototype, but what we haven't been able to do is do it at scale. And so you see some of these platforms developing their own marketplaces, which again is good to a point, but then has it got interoperability with other systems? Because the last thing you want to do as a talent is strike a deal with this brand, have an exclusivity right, and then strike up a deal with a brand over here that I'm not allowed to do with. And so I think what's happening now is the integration piece. And I think that's when it will move from prototype to scaled solution, is when you have a system that allows all the other systems to have clarity on rights usage, permissions, consent, the framework that's been outlined around what is fair for a creative to work with AI. And when you have those systems in place, I think you'll start to see the scale, because it's not just on the talent side. There's also a massive compliance concern on the buyer side. Have I got the rights to this? Is there any copyright involved in this? Am I infringing on IP? The last thing any advertiser wants to do is go down a legal battle because of that.
And just to round things up, we're here at the AI Summit. What are you looking forward to the next couple of days, and what are you looking forward to take away?
Well, I think it's I've been heavily involved with the creative AI panel section. I think I'm really interested to see innovative ways that AI is being used creatively. I think we've scratched the surface so far in terms of how it's being utilized, but I think that I'm really excited to see how other partners, budget holders are starting to look at AI from a creative landscape. I think I'm also interested in some of the kind of technical underpinning. And so there's a lot of kind of agentic AI software solutions up there that are trying to, sell their products. And I think there's some really great ones around digital identity, better infrastructure underneath some of these deals. I'm excited to see what they do in terms of conversation as well.
I might be going a step too far here, but within specifically the creative AI, is there any trends that you're looking forward to in the next kind of 12 months?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm a big believer that I think that actually in the next 12 months, AI and IP will come together. And I think that doesn't necessarily mean talent likeness or digital twins. I'm looking at Lidl did a great campaign where they created their own AI chat function, and they took the key identifier of their brand, which is their three colors, so yellow, red, blue, and they allowed any user to go and write in a prompt for a new product that they would then skin over with their new colors. And they had something like 16 million searches or prompts within the space of about 3 weeks. And at the highest peak point, within about the space of a minute, they were getting 3,000 searches a minute. Fantastic. What they then did was they took all those prompts, weighted them, and found the most searchable product, which was a bike. Lidl never sold a bike. But then they put that into store, and they had a queue round the corner for people to come and buy this bike, which is a great use of AI. Like, very creative, very fan engagement, consumer engagement, but then also clear ROI off the back of it. So I think for me, I think you'll start to see IP, and that can be brand identity, brand coloring, twins, anything else, characters coming together with AI for more creative fan engagement factors.
So now is the time for people to think about their proposition and their IP and governance. This has been great.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Benjamin, and thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I've been Rory Duquette, and this has been the AI Summit London.